Hey folks, welcome back to Lonely Horde Guitars. Today we're going to talk a little bit about how to bend sides on guitars using a side bender. I use one of those ones with a form. It's got a heated blanket. There are heated pipes that you can use, but I was looking for a little bit more consistency. I'm starting a new batch of guitars, 3 jumbos, 3 dreadnoughts, and got through the jumbos and figured I might want to talk a little bit about how I go about bending sides. I was not successful early on trying to do this. Most of the instructions that I had found online, I ended up cracking a lot of sides trying to figure out the flow. So I'm not really going to talk about the device itself so much, but more about the timing and the flow of how to get it to bend, because I think that was the real key. Was most of the instructions I had seen, they waited too long, and by the time you had done the bend, the moisture was all gone. It was dry and cracked and very brittle and broke. So I'm going to show you how I do things. Hopefully it'll be helpful for some folks. Maybe they can skip some of those early, destructive choices and get closer to getting good results quickly, though, mistakes are part of the learning process. So let's get going. So here are my 3 side sets that I'm going to use. All of them have been marked, and basically the inner sides here, these are the match sets that are going to be on the exterior of our guitar. So the first thing I want to do with each set is I want to decide where I'm going to put the waist and mark that, and do it in a consistent fashion at the same time, because if you sort of do them onesies, it's very easy to then mess this up and bend it in a way that you don't have a match set anymore. Ask me how I know. So what I do is, I've got them, the two good faces are on the inside. Flip them open. I have a piece of paper here that is, now this isn't to get like a precise layout, but it helps me determine where I want the waist to be. This is not exactly how the side is going to ultimately be, but I'm looking at this. This has got some color up here that doesn't really flow with the rest of it, so if I can chop that out. So I'm going to put that up towards where the neck is going to be, because my guitar is going to be narrower there, or my body is going to be narrower there. So let's put our waist about where this piece of paper is sitting. And really I just need to mark it on one side. I'm going to use a square. Draw that out. And then make sure I'm aligned at the bottom. Do the same thing on the other side. That's a little off. Trying to do this so the camera can see, and sometimes it makes it so I can't quite see. So let's erase that. And just bring that a little bit closer to where it needs to be. Okay, now those should be lined up pretty well. Yeah, perfect. Okay, so that's where our waist is going to be. Now that everything's marked out, we're going to go ahead and wet it and wrap it in aluminum foil. So, you do the back side first. You want it coated, but not drenched. It doesn't need a ton of moisture to make this work. And I find that if it's too wet, it just, like the colors, there's more to clean up, basically. All right, we're going to fold this over here. But what we want to do is maintain our line. So always got a handy Sharpie. Here's where we're gonna and then back to our straight edge, we're just going to extend our Sharpie line all the way across. Now we take it to where we make the stack. All right, now we need to build the stack of stuff that goes into the side bender. So we've got a bottom metal slat here, and this has already been marked by me. So here is generally where I want my waist to go. And then I've got two other markings over here of where I want the temperature sensors to go. So we lay out the first heating blanket, and this heating blanket is sort of the one that handles the bulk of the heating for the whole run. And there's a second narrower heating blanket that is just for heating up the waist when you do that bend. Now I want to align my center line with what I've got marked here on my metal slat, and then I want to make sure that I'm straight. First temperature sensor gets tucked in here between the heated blanket and my side. Second temperature sensor, basically the same thing, but with the other heated blanket. Is this really big enough to call a blanket? Seems presumptuous. And then we put on our top slat. Now our top slat, I also have marked the center line. And as long as my ends are straight and I put my wood in aligning with the center line of the bottom one, this should be where I need to look to line up with the center line on my waist here. Now this is kind of challenging to move sometimes, so I usually put a couple clips here. All right, now we load that up, align with the center line on our call. I usually crank it down just a little bit to make it stay in place. My slats should be aligned to the front of my form here to maintain, you know, let's make sure our bend is square. Then I pull these two clips and go ahead and clip the ends so that we are holding the heated blanket against our wood and it's not just drooping. And finally, before we start heating things up, I get the roller ready for the sides. This should be very, very loose right now because we don't want it grabbing while we're trying to clamp down that waist. Sometimes these are a pain to... keeping a socket handy can help us move quickly. But if we're cranking this down and this starts grabbing, then it's going to pull things, so we don't want that to happen. This should be super loose, but it gets us in place for when we start heating, because once we start heating, we don't really want to be fumbling around getting this ready. You could burn yourself, and that's just not fun. There we go. Okay. This guy is nice and loose too. Okay, so temperature is set for 300 degrees. I'm going to turn the blanket on. I never actually get that hot. So this is kind of where the timing is. You'll start to get a feel about how your bender works, what kind of wood you're using. So we're moving fast. It was 72 when I turned it on. We're up to about 120 already. As I start getting, you know, into maybe like the 160s, I'll start cranking it down just a little bit. Here I'm really only just trying to make sure that there's really good contact between the blanket and the wood. This is probably not as good a demonstration as the jumbo was, or, you know, doing an OM. There's not a lot of waist bend on the Dreadnought, though this curve is kind of tight, so that'll probably be a good demonstration. So we're up at 190 now already. This is not going to be a severe bend, so probably should have done this demo using jumbos. You'll start to hear, as it gets hot, you know, the bubbling and the crackling and the steam from the moisture. So we're up about 230 now. Just kind of feel it. It feels like it's resisting a lot. Make sure these are loose. We're at 240. I'm usually at about 260 before I get to the end of a bend on like a jumbo or an OM, maybe in the 270s. Some of that will depend on, you know, how your sensor, sort of how the sensor is calibrated or not, you know, and how well it's seated. So the waist on a Dreadnought is pretty easy. And here we can see that that bottom plate is nice and flush up against our form. So our waist is done. So what we want to do now, disconnect the power from our waist blanket, connect it to the big blanket, swap our sensors. Now the big blanket is, obviously it's already warm around here, so this is probably not accurate for the bulk of the blanket. But now we can start tightening down these guys to begin our upper and lower bout bends. And they don't have to be super snug either, just enough. All right, we're in the 220s. I'm going to start cranking on this upper bout. Now here's where the curve's the tightest. So we're taking it easy. Do our, feels like it's not quite snug enough. Tighten it down. And we're past sort of the danger zone here. Look a little bit, yeah, we're okay. And then once you get to the bottom, you know, make sure it's just good and snug. It's not gonna relax too much out of it. Lower bout is not nearly as tight on the curve, so we can move a little faster. And as you see, you're not really waiting long. Temperature says 280 right now, and Slide this down. Turn off the blanket. Now we go get coffee, have a scone, whatever makes you happy. I like to unplug the blankets because, you know, safety. And about a half hour or so, that'll be, you know, maybe 90, 100 degrees, and we'll pull it out of the form. I leave the temperature sensor in there so we know what our temperature is and we don't burn ourselves when we come back. All right, we'll pick this up in a little bit. Okay, we're down to 98 degrees. We're cool enough to pull it out of the mold. So undo these, let them release gently so you don't smack yourself in the face with a metal slat. All right, and we have a nice bent side. Now, just a little callback to what I was talking about, you know, how much moisture to use. You can see we get a little bit of, you know, water lines and stuff like that on this, and all of that will sand out. But if you really soak it, that gets really bad and it takes more work to sand it out. So now this guy can just go sit and wait for the partner, and we'll move on to making bodies. So if that's the kind of content you like, please like and subscribe, and we'll see you at the next one.